Hello, welcome to the Family Retort. This week we're talking about what makes That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime a standout among isekai, which is a fantasy escapism genre. Because last week we talked about a very contentious topic, so this week we're going to talk about something we both agree on.
More like lighthearted, kind of fun, just pop culture type stuff. Easy, easy day.
Yes, the premise is a 37-year-old man dies and gets reincarnated as a slime. Very self explanatory by the title. And there is a lot that makes it great,
Well, we can
but
kind of start
that is the
off.
general premise.
We can start off with a little bit of a summary. So he dies, gets reincarnated, but he gets kind of like special powers because of how he dies, and these powers kind of turn him into a little bit OP in the world. He has like what predator, I think.
He does have a lot of very OP powers, but what makes this show a standout among this compared to other generic got whisked away to another world and it's overpowered is that how they play it off. It's a lot like how in One Punch Man he is overpowered, but they play it off in a very this is boring kind of way. But in
Well,
this
that's more a comedy.
series,
Yeah.
so they play with him being overpowered, not necessarily as it is in some ways very um, fantasy-esque, where you're like self-insert as the main character and you're like, ah, yes, I'm overpowered, but it doesn't feel like that when I'm watching it. So
Uh,
I think the
I think I can elaborate on this. So,
yes,
it starts off. He's just kind of like doing his thing in a cave, and he's like, "Oh, okay," and then runs into a dragon, which is like one of the strongest beings in the universe, right? Or in their little universe, and gets talking to them, becomes friends with him, uh, and he kind of travels through the dungeon a little bit, absorbing all the monsters he comes across. And we don't really know how long he's in there. It's a while, isn't it? Before he gets out.
theoretically.
But he basically develops his skills in this dungeon. And it's over
They
time.
do it's almost like a montage. They have a little montage of him training in the
Yeah.
dungeon and absorbing things.
And then he finally gets out and, he's like, oh, hey. Because some goblins come and say, please help us. You're so overpowered. And he's like, what are you talking about?
So the show is not necessarily about his powers, but about not just this goblin town, but how it expands.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what sets it apart. It's more about him establishing. Well, first it's like him establishing a town, and then his town gets bigger, and then it's establishing a city, and then okay, more people kind of I guess not really people, monsters kind of flock to this town, and then it becomes bigger, and then he becomes in charge of the forest, so the whole area essentially. And then it's like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And he's a very likable character too.
I think they do a great balance between strengthening up having the characters and also a bit of the political intrigue of part of that. I think that also is what to me makes it seem a little bit different from some of the other isekai. A lot of its other isekai are very just like pure adventure, single character ups his skill base until he becomes overpowered, and then he just beats everybody and is somehow great, and everybody else is just a side character.
Or he
But
starts off overpowered, and where I like this one too. And is yeah, he might start off with an overpowered skill, but there's always kind of somebody more powerful out there. And he does a good job of developing his skills to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, I have so many things going on now.
Well, because I feel like it's not about him developing his skills, it's more about resource management and people management and interpersonal skills. Like, it's not about the I'm the strongest one in the universe. It's like, okay, how do I protect these very weak people
it, I
in
got
a
it.
very resource rich area that
It's
everybody wants to invade?
kind of like the reluctant hero. He doesn't want to fight anybody, but he's like, okay, if you insist, and then beats the crap out of them. Um, but even then, there's some tough fights that he has to go through where he doesn't quite win. We're gonna try and keep this spoiler free, but there is a struggle there. He almost does die a few times, so it's not like
Well, is it really about him? Because I think the stakes are we know that as a slime, he's virtually indestructible, but we care about everybody else in the community. We
yeah,
have a few sets of different people, and we really empathize with this community. They make it a very good point of when he discovers the goblins and there is weak, tiny little village, and he tries to take them to a dwarf kingdom to be to get skills so that they can build up their village more because they don't have any building skills or anything like that. They make it very clear that they are basically an oppressed class when they're weaker. And with his strength, via their very well thought out magic system, they
yeah,
are stronger now. But generically, they are kind of oppressed almost within this world building system within a traditional world building system where we have humans and they align with dwarves and elves, and then all the other monsters are things that humans like attack and fight with. And so I think the premise, part of it is that the premise really does have such a paradigm shift that it really makes you think about that, and they really go through with that of being like, well, usually goblins are weak monsters, and now here they are as our community that we have to protect, and we have to rethink that. And all these other monsters that join the cast as time goes on are also previously in other medias. Those monsters are also generally the villains, so I think there's a bit of a paradigm
yeah.
shift with that.
I'm actually kind of glad you brought up the magic in it. So the like world building magic, it's actually I think one of my favorite parts of the show. It's just very well constructed. It's complex, but it's not hard to understand. Did you get any part of the show where you're just like, I don't get what's going on? They kind of I feel like lay it out very well, even as the show develops in the later seasons. Even when stuff gets like really more complicated, you already have kind of the basics from the beginning.
I think that it does make sense sometimes because it borrows from things that you've seen or heard before, like a magic system and internal skill structure, and they kind of play off of things that we're familiar with, like the game structure almost. Like a skill has a label and a name. But I do think that you're right. The magic system is really well thought out, and that internal consistency is part of what makes it so good. Is it really keeps it has a built structure within the world and story. So you can go along with the story because there's no part of it that just feels like, oh, wait, where did this come from?
Yeah,
It's always been consistent. It's always been, he has this really intense skill. And I personally like how they almost give the voice slash skill in some ways a bit of a personality that or some sort of comedic timing that make the exposition entertaining.
Yeah, it's a pretty funny show too, honestly. Like they do a good balance of being serious when they need to be serious, lighthearted when they need to be lighthearted, and it flows very well. So, um, with the more serious moments, they don't inject comedy, right? I know a lot of like other shows out there will try and be 100% comedy, which there's some successful ones. Konosuba is a good one that I like, and it's one of those isekais where it's pretty much uh, mostly comedy. It's kind of played off comedic, which it's pretty decent, but it's not my favorite thing. I wish there were some more serious moments to it. Uh, or another one that was kind of not very good. I tried watching it and I stopped at like 5 episodes in. I was just like, this is garbage. It was called Isekai Cheat Magician. Basically, two. I think it was like two people get transported or three people get transported into this world. They're students, and they're like. I think the thing that bothers me the most is just they don't care about their old life. Their whole life got uprooted, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, this is okay, oh, cool." They don't go like you would think that's devastating, right? You're away from your family, all your friends. You're in a completely different setting, new world. You don't understand the rules. You might not even understand the language, and you're just like, "Oh yeah, I'm okay with this." No, no person would realistically do that.
I think that that's such an interesting like separation that I also want to say part of what makes the comedy of this show good is it's not about punchy one-liners. It's a very situational comedy with its where it's really to me, I just rewatched the first few episodes before we did this podcast so I could have it refreshed in my memory, is that it has some very well-timed comedy that it's just funny because of timing somehow. Or they show the very weak goblins and it's almost funny that how weak this village
Just how
is.
pathetic they are.
Yeah, it's almost funny. Or he's like, I don't know, you guys who are previously literally just enemies, you're just gonna be buddies. Like buddy
Yeah,
system.
yeah.
And or or I think one reoccurring joke is how he's bad at naming things, but he's like not terrible but and everybody loves his names.
Oh yeah, that's because of basically when a stronger monster names another monster, they get stronger by having a name.
They transfer power. But no, but just the name themselves. Nobody ever complains about his names that
Oh
he
yeah,
gives things. Everybody's like, this is the best name I've ever heard. And he's like, Gabita.
it's just like
Gabito.
he's just like changing one letter of it for like each person, and then going through and then changing another letter.
He's like, I feel bad that this is so lazy. There's so many of you.
Yeah, uh, but like I said, going back to the what other isekai kind of bother me. ReZero is another good one I like. I like the first season. The second season, I didn't think it was as good, but it was still decent. But this dude like gets transported, and it hooked me in really quick because he's like, "What the hell is going on?" Which would be anybody's reaction. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I haven't seen that one.
Uh, Basically, his quote unquote power is he dies and then gets reset to a certain point.
Gotcha. I feel like it's was on my list to watch, and I just watched some of the first one, and I just for some reason I just couldn't get into it the same way. And I think that
It's good, but it's like super heavy. There's
I think
definitely
that might
some
be it.
episodes where you're just like, oh my, where he just keeps dying and then just like gives up and
A
just
fair amount of the
keeps dying.
isekai that I have watched us read are like webtoons and C novels. So, and it's been a bit of a while since I watched a lot of isekai anime. And but I do think that that time I got reincarnated as a slime does stand out because not only does he have to adjust to being in another world, he has to adjust to being a slime. And I was messaging my brother because I convinced him to watch the show, and he got way more into me that he apparently watches clips of one of the big fight scenes just randomly. Um,
That's funny.
but he was like, "Hey, do you notice how the main character gets more slime-like as time goes on? Like originally he's more attached to his human life and you can really see how who they
Yeah.
establish who he is in the human life and they kind of show you who he is in the human life in a previous world, but as it goes on, it's who he is in this life also becomes a different thing on itself and he becomes much more slime-like
Oh,
in his.
that's a good point. I like. Yeah,
And
I can
that's what
see
I
that.
think makes this premise so interesting is because a lot of other isekai have a very human centric view of things. And that's not to say that this isekai, when the monsters get upgraded, they have more humanoid forms. So but I think that that's just a limitation of a visual medium. Human beings like seeing human beings. But it's that having a slime as the center, usually the weakest of beings,
Yeah,
and
and
him having to
oh,
adjust to that makes it really interesting. They do so much. There's so much potential in that premise, and they deliver on that premise in a lot of small little details as time goes on that you wouldn't even think about or notice.
well, I like that you said that he's like, so in the world, slimes are pretty much the weakest monsters. Um, and what's really interesting is because they're the weakest monsters in the universe, he is constantly being underestimated by his opponents. And that essentially throughout a lot of the series is their downfall is because they're like, oh, there's no way he could be as strong as he is. There's no
I think he
way.
does that on purpose, though, because
Yes, he
he plays into that,
he plays
and I
into it
think that
though, and that's I think also where it's strong is he knows how other people think of him, and then he plays into those weaknesses. So when different plots, especially later on too, like I said, I'm trying to stay away from spoilers, especially since I know you haven't seen
I haven't read the
all.
light novels.
Uh,
I've I've watched all of season two, but
okay, well, even
do you
when
know apparently season two you have to be a VIP to watch now? That's like new.
what?
I just re-logged in to Crunchyroll, and
Oh,
before the movie, I could watch all of season two. And after the movie, apparently, I have to be a VIP member to watch season two.
uh, all right. Side note: don't get me started on Crunchyroll. I pay for a subscription because I watch tons of stuff, but the app itself is garbage. But
Oh, yes, it is.
that's for a different discussion completely.
I'm sure.
I'm not gonna bitch about that on this one.
Just a heads up to anybody watching, though. But the first season is free on Crunchyroll, I'm pretty sure. And
it's all over the
there's,
place. Yeah, it's not hard to watch it these days, and I do like how they're gonna keep continuing the show. Awesome. I don't know if you've seen it, but have you seen the Slime Diaries at all?
I don't know if I watched all of it, but I have watched most of it, a fair amount of it. Though
Okay.
that was pretty fun.
Yeah, and that's well, COVID and everything happened, which I think that was um, supposed to be in between seasons one and seasons two. That's kind of like a holdover while they were making season two.
Yeah.
Kind of like how there's a movie this year, and I think next year they're gonna do season three. So it's kind of one of those like, all right, we can't make this whole season because the seasons are long. They're 25 episodes each, I believe.
And apparently that's now a long season.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because that used to be the standard. Um,
Yeah.
Unless you're like an OVA or something with 5 episodes or 6 episodes. But 25, so they break it in half with that though. They came out with a movie this year which is I would say fairly decent. I thought it was interesting. Um,
I had fun.
yeah, it was fun. I saw reviews on it and it was kind of funny. They're like, "All right, I don't like this movie." I was like, "Well, the movie's not really for you, critic." As much as I hate to say it, it's for
It
people who like the show, want to keep watching it.
I mean, it's just a small part of the show. I don't know, it felt like an anime movie where it's like not really canon
It's just a side story.
necessary.
Yeah, it's just a side
Yeah.
story. It's just kind of like,
It's
hey,
just
here's a little distraction while we do season 3, right? To
yes.
get your
Yes.
fix and know we're still working on stuff. So,
Okay, so we established that what makes this show great is the premise, the execution, the magical system, the comedic timing, the way they can be serious sometimes. What to you really stands out? Like, what makes this show special to you?
uh, I what caught me into the show, I think, was the first battle with the ogres. And why I
Mm,
explain this is he could have easily just destroyed them on the spot, which a lot of shows probably would have gone that route, right? But
right.
he went, hey, I'm not the person you're looking for. I think you have me confused for somebody else because there was a little bit of confusion of identity at the very beginning, and the ogres weren't listening, and they just started attacking him. And he was just defending himself, just going at it very effectively. And he went, hey, listen, I'm not the person you're looking for. And they're like, we don't want to hear it. And he's just like, okay. And then he starts putting him down one by one. He's like, are you going to listen to me? And they're like, we can't win this fight, but we're going to keep trying until we die. It's like, oh, God. He's just like, are you guys kidding me? Come on. Eventually, through just finally just going, just like batting them down constantly, just beating the crap out of them. He's like, okay, I don't know what the hell you have against me. Tell me what's going on. And then finally they relent and he goes, all right, come back with me. We should discuss this. And eventually, through their dialogue, they figure out what's going on, the situation. If you haven't seen it, like I said, watch it. It's a great show. But they think he's a different like working for a different demon, well, a demon lord actually. But he goes, no, I have no idea who you're talking about to begin with. I just got here, uh, but I'm willing to work with you guys to basically avenge your town that got destroyed because these ogres are a little bit more of an issue, and that's kind of where ogres attack their town, you know. And I think that kind of was really the oh yeah, that's really cool, and it was a really good fight too. I know people don't say this a lot, but I don't know if you noticed the sound design in the show at all.
It's not something that is at the forefront of my mind, but something that you definitely notice if they get wrong.
Yeah,
So that's a great thing that you pointed out. I think that there's so many things about this show that they got right.
it. I okay. So
I
I've
think part
said
of
this to my wife a few times. Um, the sound design everything feel like all the attacks feel very weighty. Like
No.
like there's a big impact for everything. And I was actually looking at old Gundam shows and even Dragon Ball Z, and I don't know what about it, but the sound. Oh, Bleach. Bleach was the other one that I was watching, um, where they're fighting with swords, right? And it's just like tink 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 tink, pow, tink
Oh.
tink 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 tink, and it's just like there's no like
It doesn't have any gravitas versus like
yeah.
Dragon Ball Z very feels like cartoon
Yeah, it
sound
even
effects.
Dragon Ball Z, yeah, they're powering up and they're screaming and they go ah, but it's I don't know if it's just like the base levels or something, but they put a lot of thought into their attacks. Like their attacks, the sound just feels so powerful and like yeah, I can see that thing just obliterating like a whole entire town if it was not curbed well. And I think that's the other thing that kind of like you don't notice it at first, but I've watched this show a few times. I watched it on my own, and then I got my wife to watch it, and then we watched it in English, and then we rewatched it in with another friend of ours in Japanese when it was coming out. So you know,
That's how you know it's a good show when
like
you rewatch it 5 times
yeah,
just showing it to
and,
people.
and I don't mind it. It's just like yeah, I like this. It's good. It's fun.
Well, I think it also really shows that I mean, you read the light novels. I have tried to find the light novels to read, but
I
I don't think I actually did.
actually cheated and listened to the audiobooks.
That is amazing. I didn't even know there were audiobooks of the light novels. That's fantastic.
You got to look on YouTube. They're out there. You just got to look. But it's super long. There's like hours and hours and hours and hours of it. So I kind of just threw
So
it
when
on.
you listened to the light novels, did you skip the parts they already did, or did you re-listen to all of what they had already done?
I skipped. I know they go into a lot more detail, and they go a lot more detail into like how things work in the world too. So there's a lot. Like if you're interested in it, it's cool. Um, I did try and listen to like the first book and the second book, and it's been some time since I listened to it, and I basically just kind of like continuously listened to it, so they all kind of blended together. But heads up, there's some really freaking cool stuff. I'm not gonna say anything, but uh, it gets
Coming in the future that you
oh
think will be in
man,
the anime, or
I
that's all in the light novel?
that's in the light novel, and will get translated into the manga because I know the manga is still running, and then translated into the anime, which I'm excited for. And just because he's OP doesn't mean there's not other
Six.
overpowered characters in the world too,
Oh, I see.
which is nice too, because you know when you have one person that's just overpowered, like continuously overpowered, there's what's the threat? You know they're
Well,
just gonna
and
just be like, blah, I obliterate you, blah, I obliterate you too. There's no
well, I think they kind of
stakes.
grounded by showing how he's so overpowered compared to these weak goblins. And he does try to level up the people in his town along with him. But they established pretty early on with the dragons that there are overpowered individuals
Yeah,
already in the universe. And part of what makes him overpowered in the first place is that he like swallowed a dragon.
well, kind of. It's
I mean, and not exactly, but I think that that is a huge part of it personally. I mean, I'm sure that you might know more in the light novels, but from the impression I get from the beginning of the anime,
so
part of
it's
it is his inherent skill, and as time goes on, more of it is his own skill leveling up. But in the very beginning, part of what his big aura is is that he's carrying around the aura of the dragon inside of him. It's not his own.
so uh, I'll just say kind of minor spoilers. It's more like the technical side of things. So, the naming, right? Naming is big in this world, where if you're a powerful monster
Oh,
and you name somebody,
is it
so
because a dragon named him?
here's the thing: the more powerful the monster, if you get named by a super powerful person or monster, you get more power. So since essentially he got named by a dragon, which is top of the list, he is the most powerful or one of the most powerful entities in this entire universe. He automatically starts off super powerful with more of the magic than anybody else. And I mean, he
Well,
develops his own skill in his own right, but because he kind of had a jump start, and that's not super well explained in the anime until way later. And
okay,
then
that makes sense. Well,
as
it makes sense within the eternal magic world that they already established. They just didn't literally lay it out for us like that
yeah,
in the beginning.
they kind of explain it later, and they also explain a little bit later. Like I said, minor spoilers. Um, that his great sage skill, because they say that naming is super dangerous. I don't know if you caught on that, but that if you are a powerful monster and you name other people, if you there's a potential where you could die because your magic kills go so low, you're basically done for. It's
Yes.
actually very dangerous to name things. But he just names people willy nilly like it's nothing, right?
Well, because he doesn't realize at first, but then I guess.
Here's the thing. So again, like I said, spoilers. If you've seen the show, awesome. This might just kind of be explaining some, I don't want to say plot holes, but things that aren't exactly explained unless you've watched it a bunch and know a little bit more of the background. Great Sage, his one of his super skills that he has, moderates how much of his magic he transfers when he names somebody. So he has
Oh,
a built-in safety system
that nobody else has.
that nobody else has. Correct. So he can just go and name people willy nilly like it's nothing, and nothing bad will ever happen to him.
I
Whereas,
thought he was just replenishing those magicals because he was super great somehow.
I mean, kind of, it's like a pool, like in a like a game where even if you use a bunch, it'll regen over time.
Well, I thought that part of it was that because he named so many people, that it's like building a muscle, right? Where you exhaust all your magic and then you replenish it. And because your body thinks you keep needing more magic to name all these people that you just
not
name
not
on the
quite, not quite.
side. Okay, I guess I imagined that it was like building a muscle and that was every time that he keeps naming more and more people is building some sort of muscle of establishing more magic reserves.
But I mean, as he gets stronger, he still gets more magic. Well, it's called magic kills, but whatever. Um, I'm sure there'll be somebody that's like, "Oh my gosh, you didn't say magic kills. You said magic." It's like whatever.
I think what
Same difference.
also makes this show enjoyable is that the main character is very rational. I know that in some ways you could say, oh, would a person really do like be this even minded and be this forgiving and good and nice or whatever? But I think that as a viewer, it's really nice to watch somebody be rational. I don't know. I
Yes.
think for me, that's part of what brings the enjoyment is it's like, this person who thought ahead and made good decisions. So nice to watch versus
Well, I think it's
a
funny
lot of
because
shows.
he.
Sorry, continue.
Uh, okay. He's kind of flying by the seat of his pants most of the time. He's just, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, that's genius of you," and he's just like, sure, yeah, I definitely wasn't just making it up as I went along." Um, but it's interesting you say that because I know we talked about this a little bit before the podcast, where you appreciate how things were established, even from the get go. So he his town grows but his previous job that he's been doing for, I don't know, 20, probably something plus years
He
at that
is
point.
37, so he's probably like 17 at the most. 17 years at the
Oh
most.
gosh, I'm sure. You know what? I'm sure it's more than that because he probably had to go to school for that.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is when he was 20, 20 to 37 is 17 years.
Oh yeah, math. Uh
So at most, but the thing is it's just he just has a very
oh
easygoing, calm, I'm going to help people out type of personality, almost like a yes man, but in a way that's not bitter
well,
about it.
not. I wouldn't say so much a yes man because it shows even before he gets reincarnated because he gets reincarnated by getting stabbed and it shows him at his job. One of his basically underlings or coworkers, because he's management, comes up to him. He's like, "Oh, hi! I wanted to show you my girlfriend because I think you're a really awesome guy and I like
So
you."
funny.
It's a little it's a little awkward, but it's kind of funny. But you see that he's well respected in the company because he cares about his coworkers and the people he manages. Also, he is
He's a good
part.
senpai.
Oh yeah, and he works in basically construction, not necessarily like construction like building stuff, but like layouts of different, like a city planner. It seemed like.
Building contracting.
Yeah, building, contracting, laying out stuff for the city, kind of like that that sort of work field. And as his city is growing, in once he gets reincarnated, you see it's like, okay, well that makes sense why he's planning out the city the way he is. You know how it's growing. He goes, okay, well, we need this here, and it's not just haphazardly, right? So it establishes he already has those skills ahead of time.
The seductive joy of good city planning.
I do think it was kind of funny. His one of his dying wishes was like, destroy my hard drives of all the
Yes.
inappropriate stuff, and then you see just at the end of the episode, his friend like dumps his computer into the bathtub.
I love the
Oh
disclaimer to not do that at home.
yeah, it's like oh duh. Uh, but it kind of shows that like he was already a decent person when he was alive. He was well respected. He cared about just in a little snippet, and they do a good job of establishing that before he gets stabbed. And I think it's kind of interesting. After that, he's just like, "Oh, I'm so cold," and then you hear the voice. They call it the voice of the world. Go, okay, you get resistance to cold. He's like, oh, I'm getting hot now. Okay, resistance to heat. Finding a body. You hear all these things and you're like, what is going on, right?
Yes.
He's like, man, I I
It
would
does
be a
make it.
a sage or something, and it's like unknown skill, and then it kind of sets up all of these skills for him ahead of time because of how he died and his requests, or basically just saying things, and it got interpreted as requests.
Yes. They do. With the first episode, they really make it seem like all these great skills that he achieved that are somehow like are tied to this instance where he died.
Or even
And
overpowered in some ways.
yeah, it makes sense that the way it doesn't seem like it comes from nowhere. They establish it.
Yeah.
It's grounded within a material circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's reinterpreted and misinterpreted and misunderstood. But I think they do such a great job of grounding things, and I think that that is part of what makes a difference because And isekai is fundamental a little bit about being a fantasy of going somewhere else and of being stronger, of being powerful, of being important, of being able to be somewhere that's not crammed in a tiny city full of a ton of other
Well,
people, not surrounded by nature.
yeah.
Um, well, I mean, I'm just there is a reason why isekai are such an overcrowded and overproduced genre right now.
So here's something that I was talking with somebody about. Look, if you have an isekai where the person gets quote unquote reincarnated and that has no bearing on the story whatsoever, what the hell is even the point? You've just made a fantasy anime and then you just had to throw in, oh, I died and got reincarnated, or oh, I got transported to a new world. It doesn't fucking matter.
That's a great point, actually. What makes the difference between an isekai and a regular fantasy story?
Yeah, it's just like, well, and especially if you look at like the crappy ones, where
I think about that a lot, actually, where
nothing
I'm like,
carries
why
over.
couldn't this have just been a fantasy?
Exactly.
Like, why did it have to be an
You
isekai?
you can make a good fantasy story and not have to be reincarnated. Um, a good, well, I wouldn't say it's the best one. It's one that I've been watching recently. It's like, I got fired in my late 30s, or I got fired from the demon army in my late 30s, and now I'm just chilling. It's something like that. It's one of those stupid long titles that you really don't need, but it's innocent, right? It doesn't start off as an isekai. It's just like this dude got adopted by a demon army, and he's like just a pretty cool dude. I would say he's a really good administrator for the demon army. And then basically new management takes over. So the generals get how should I explain this? One of the generals retires of the army, of the demon army, and then puts his son in, and his son is kind of an idiot. So he's like, "You're fired." And then it kind of later is revealed that no, actually, this guy was super important to the army because he was a fantastic administrator and he basically was running almost everything in this army, and everybody looked up to him because of it. Because he genuinely cared about.
A secret power being good at paperwork.
Kind of, yeah. That was his secret power. He was fantastic at the paperwork aspect. He had people, like, he cared about everybody that was under him, like a good leader.
You know, I just think that we really look down on paperwork and glorify fighting skills a lot. And I'm just so glad that we're having more shows to talk about how good being at, like, how being good at
He was
paperwork
a
is
great
important.
pencil pusher. His superpower
Well,
is
okay, but
pencil
the thing
pushing.
is that the winning a war is about logistics. It doesn't
Well,
matter how good you individually fight if you can't get supplies to people on
true.
time.
That's actually true. But I mean, it's later
That's
comes
why
out.
America wins, is that we have all of this administration to make wars feasible. We have all these backup, we have all these supply lines.
Yeah, I mean, it does come out a little bit later that the guy has some powers and stuff, and you're just kind of like, all right. But it's a fun show. It's decent. It's not my favorite show, but I can relate. Uh, but we've been going for a little bit now, so from what I hear, you like the show because it's engaging. The comedy's there. It's fairly well done. The mechanics make sense in the world, and he's just a likable guy. How can you not like him? He's a happy little slime.
Um, so from what I'm understanding, like something that you pointed out that beyond the basics is how much the impact of the sound design and how good the fighting scenes are
Yeah, they're
and his
so
like
good.
personality within those fighting scenes.
It's so good.
To me, I think the premise of the show that really sticks out to me is the first of all, the premise, which really does center around monsters and almost being about trying to establish a outsiders as a community and the community building and town building aspects. Those are really the central aspects to me.
Yeah.
Um, I was talking to somebody who watches a lot of anime, and they think that slime either inspired or started or was part of the like beginning intro where a lot of monster things started being more of the main character, but it's still not. Slime is one of the best examples of it being well done, and that also the main character is kind of androgynous looking, which kind of when they assume human form, which I think really relays part of them to being slime and being almost a genderless monster.
Well, yeah. I mean, he
Um,
technically is genderless in the thing because he even tried that. He was just like, "Oh, I have a new form," and he goes, "Oh, I have nothing there."
right. Well, but you could still be more masculine shaped if you
Yeah,
wanted to, but
true.
he assumes a kind of a gender neutral form, which I just think is really interesting and makes the show very appealing. I I also think that while in the intro they kind of give you a lot of standard fare fan service, and I when I rewatched the first few episodes, I'm like, man, they really changed. But that as the show goes on, they don't really lean into like the harem aspect. Like it's not like other isekai where you have like one male main character and there's
Yeah,
like a ton of female characters that you're supposed to like
they
choose a team to be
they
on.
still have one
It
or
really
two
is.
waifus, but it's not like a harem. They're
It
their
doesn't
own
really feel
characters.
like a waifu to me because there's all of the other male characters and a lot of them it kind of seems I don't know.
Waifu and husbandos. I mean, I
Yeah,
guarantee you can go get pillows with almost anyone from the slime series.
I'm sure, but it just doesn't feel like that's the main focus of this show. I feel
No,
like a lot of the main
no,
focus is
that's a
community
side
building.
side thing. Yeah,
And I think something small that I really enjoy about the show is that they have, as they establish a town, they show that, oh, the town goes and hunts together. And then they have like town sized hot pots with a giant crab and those kinds of scenes, which really
yeah.
make you feel
It's
very lived in, very,
you
very
know
friendly, very warm.
it's very community based too. Everybody helps everybody else out.
And they make the trade results, all that. It just makes it so enjoyable and easy to watch. It's such an easy watch. They don't make it there. I'm
Complicated.
pretty sure I've cried to that one scene. But otherwise, it's a very easy, enjoyable show to watch that is stand up among other isekai. I think that premise really does. I personally think it really challenges some of our beliefs about the generic fantasy system that we kind of has a default, and that this show is a great question to
Yeah,
that. And I think that that's what part of what makes it stand out is the premise and the world
yeah,
building, and they make you question what is good and what is evil, because here he is being called a demon lord for defending his town, you know.
yeah. And I definitely like. I think season one is good for like establishing the world, and then season two is really good for developing and really going into it.
The plot and the politic
Yeah,
of it, kind of.
I don't want to get like I said, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's some points. I got a little teary eyed in season two with shit that goes down, and then especially after that, I don't know if you remember, but when I'll just say he goes and gets revenge, and just it's so one sided. It's just like, but at that point you're just like, yeah, fuck those guys, kill them all.
Yes, that was the one scene that I was talking about crying at. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Well,
and
because that's the scene that it really shows you what the stakes are. right? It
Yeah.
really grounds you in, because it's not about this one character, it's about these people,
The
right?
town.
The town. And I think that that's part of, to me, that's part of what escapism is being part of like a community. I think a lot of us nowadays, we don't have the same level of community building, like physically, like he designs his town community based. And so it's a lot easier for people to be like that. Our society isn't structured in that same way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the escapism aspect to to me, is that sense of community. Like when I'm this is gonna be the saddest, loneliest thing ever, but when I'm having dinner and I'm gonna be eating by myself, I'll like watch one of these types of anime where they all
It
eat
just
together.
it just makes you feel good. It's a feel good kind of thing.
It's a very good feel good show, but you know, it's and it they don't make you, there's enough there that it's interesting, but they don't make it difficult for you to enjoy.
Yeah,
They make it
100%.
easy. So, in conclusion, please watch the show.
Yeah, just watch it. um, so next week we're gonna be talking about a book.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, I'm so excited. Have you been listening? Oh,
I
thank you.
I
I'm so
have.
sorry.
I believe we talking about the Horace Heresy series, book 1.
Oh, I thought we were going to talk about the mushroom book.
Uh-oh.
Okay, we can talk about a book.
We'll talk about a book. We'll figure out which one later.
Um, Thank you guys so much for listening to our show. I hope that you guys enjoy our discussion of pop culture, and that if you guys watch Slime, I would love to know what stood out to you. Like what, because everybody took something different from this show that they love. Like everybody I talked to about this show, it's something different that makes it special to them. So if you watch the show, please tell me what made it special to you specifically. And if we convinced you to watch it, please tell me. All right.